Season of Discovery Phase 2 is going to be coming out here on February 8th, and there is a preview with a video that we're going to go ahead and watch, and I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that's coming out with Phase 2.
Hi, I'm Linny Cook Saverline, and I'm a producer on
Looks like it's working.
Back at BlizzCon, we had the absolute pleasure of finally sharing Season of Discovery with you all, and we've loved watching all of the new challenges you've overcome, the meta you've created, and the adventures you've all had in Phase 1.
I loved Phase 1. I can't get enough of how good Phase 1 was. It is one of the best RPGs that has ever been created, and then they iterated on it and made it feel even better. I'm really excited for Phase 2. I can't wait to play it.
And now we'd like to chat with you about Phase 2. Today we're going to do a brief overview of some of the new adventures in store for you. Our topics today include information about our new 10-player raid Gnomeregan, dungeon updates, rune ability updates, PvP updates, profession updates, and more.
Look at all the stuff that they're adding to this, and you think about with Bungie and the way that they tried to hit on nostalgia when they re-released raid weapons that had already come out with new perks, and now you can craft them, but the raid is exactly the same as it used to be. This is not the same level of nostalgia at all. This is a completely different animal. In the Black Fathom Deeps raid, which is the raid from Phase 1 of Season of Discovery, there was new stuff to actually do. There was new bosses and loot to get. And because of that, I feel like if Bungie re-releases, if they want us to go back and do these old raids, I feel like they need to take a page out of Blizzard's book, redo some of the stuff inside of the raids to make it feel like a fresh experience for us, because otherwise we're just doing the same thing that we've done for the last 8 years or whatever it is, however long it's been since the raid.
Which should help answer some of the questions we've gotten around our previous phase and where we're going with the new one. We're going to bop through our slides pretty fast, so you may want to pause or watch back through the recording.
Oh, we're going to be pausing
everything on the slides.
Let me know if you guys can't hear this.
Up on the PTR soon. We're doing something similar to Phase 1, where we only make the era and hardcore content available, not the season itself. It is likely there will be some data mining, but beware, not everything you see data mined will actually be in the patch.
I don't like data mining. I don't read the data mined stuff because I don't want to be spoiled for the things that will actually be coming out. And I don't want to get my hopes up about something that I hope will get into the game and then ends up not making it or not making the cut, but I do want to talk about some of the stuff that's coming. It's going to be huge. It's going to be an enormous update, not only to the game, but also to the player base, who is kind of a little bit bored with, the kind of sentiment right now is they're a little bit bored with Phase 1, and they're ready for Phase 2 to come out, and I totally get that. It's been out for like 6 weeks. I know a lot of people are really fast. They blew through to level 25. They did the raid. They did all the stuff. I just did all this stuff like a week or two ago, and because of that, it's still fresh to me. But once I had finished the raid, I kind of got it. I kind of got to the point where I was like, all right, bring me Phase 2 now.
This build will contain some experimental things, stuff for later phases, and things that maybe didn't work quite how we wanted them to. We're going to start off talking about our new raid Gnomeregan. Our assistant lead designer, Tim Jones, will be walking us through it. Take it away, Tim.
Tim?
Hello there.
Oh, there you are.
Thank you, Lenny, for that introduction. I'm Tim Jones, the assistant lead game designer on...
I don't know why, but I kind of expected there to be like a higher production quality here on this video. I kind of, I maybe expected to see like a person's face once or twice. I'm not sure why I expected that, but I didn't know that it was just going to be slides coming into this. There's nothing wrong with that. Not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with like a PowerPoint presentation or whatever, but I kind of expected it to be a little bit more human, but that's cool. I'm excited for this Gnomeregan raid. Tell me about it, Tim.
On World of Warcraft Classic, and it's my pleasure to talk to you more, give you a sneak peek at Gnomeregan, the second level up raid Season of Discovery, and the raid content that you'll be participating in at level 40 in Phase 2. Let's get into it. So, much like Black Fathom Deeps, Gnomeregan will be a 10-player raid. There will be 6 bosses.
The fact that they are taking a 5-man dungeon and turning it into a 10-player raid is incredible. They did this with Black Fathom Deeps, and it worked. I ran through it. It was super fun. I can't tell you how many times I did Black Fathom Deeps over the years. Like, I have a Horde tattoo. I have been playing this game for a long time, dude. I was there at the start. I've played it throughout the years. Obviously, I didn't play, like, every single, like, week and patch and stuff like that, but I played almost every patch. I played almost every expansion, at least for a good amount of time, and I did Black Fathom Deeps a lot of times. So going in and having it be a 10-man raid, it was refreshing. The mechanics were cool. It actually felt like a raid, which, you know, you think about when the level cap is 60, you think about how many abilities every class has, and then you think about how much complexity can they really add to a raid encounter if the level cap is only 25. But they did a good job. They added enough mechanics that it was doable, but not too many mechanics that people were overwhelmed with the amount of things they had to learn going into a 25-man raid. The difference between Black Fathom Deeps and Gnomeregan is a genuinely hard dungeon in Classic WoW, especially in hardcore. Yeah, like, if you go into Gnomeregan in hardcore, you are asking to die. You are asking for something to go wrong, and your character to be gone, and your time to be wasted. So, the fact that they're making it a 10-player raid, I feel like it maybe should have always been a 10-player raid, because the dungeon itself is full of mobs. Like, it is full of possibilities to absolutely die, to wipe, for your entire group to die. There's so many chances that something could go wrong that it's just, I feel like it's just better as a 10-player raid. That's just more opportunity for things to be covered. The fact that there's 6 bosses is good. Over 100 new items. How are there over 100 new items inside of the raid? That's insane to think about. Anyway, I'm gonna let Tim talk. Cook, Tim, cook.
There were originally 5 bosses in Gnomeregan, if you didn't count the Dark Iron Ambassador, so there's one more new boss that no one's ever fought before.
They added a new boss, and this is what I'm talking about. Like, they just keep adding things, and that's awesome. They're doing a great job with Season of Discovery, adding new bosses to what used to be a 5-man dungeon and turning it into a 10-man raid. Like, that's above and beyond, and this is a small team pulling all of this off. The Season of Discovery team is not like the retail team. Like, this is like a fraction of the size of the people who work on retail WoW, and I feel like they're doing maybe better than even retail WoW is pulling it off. Not that they're putting out more content, but the quality of their content has been spot on.
And, of course, redesigns from the ground up on all of the other bosses, so brand new experience overall, a ton of new rewards and items, more epics than we had in Black Fathom Deeps, with more sources, different bosses than just the last 2 bosses, dropping those.
I want to talk about the epics for a second, because getting a purple in Classic WoW, like, a purple drop is like the second to highest, but basically for most people the purple drop is the rarest. Excuse me. I'm recovering from lung surgery, so if my coughs sound ridiculously weak, that's why. Sorry about that. A purple drop in Classic WoW was like an incredible moment. It happened like once, maybe once a character, once every 2 characters, and then in Black Fathom Deeps, they added epics for you to actually get from the raid, and the difference in power between an epic and like a blue quality item, which I think is rare, the difference in power is enormous. And because of that, the epics in Classic WoW were always, like, it was always a shit your pants moment when an epic finally dropped. To have them add those to the raid is so good, because now these characters that you're kind of working them up in progression. You know, you have your green gear that you get from questing, your green quality gear, and then you do dungeons and you get like your blue quality gear, and now there's a raid for you to do at a low level to get a purple item, and like sometimes there are more than one per class depending on what spec you are and what you want to do, and the ability to get those, it makes the progression system feel so smooth. And when the level cap is low, it means that everything is attainable within a reasonable amount of time. And I think that's amazing. I'm glad they're adding more new epics inside of Gnomeregan. And like I said, Gnomeregan was one of the most dangerous dungeons to do, so I can imagine it's going to be a decently difficult raid as well.
New item sets for classes to pursue. The quests and rewards have been brought up to level 40. And there's a brand new profession quest chain that leads into a pretty deep opportunity for people to find materials and craft a lot of really cool and powerful items.
In Phase 1 of Season of Discovery, they added a new quest chain for professions, so if you were a tailor, or a leatherworker, or a blacksmith, they added a new quest chain for you to do, that if you completed the raid and you finished all of the objectives, you were able to craft yourself a purple item, for your class. And I went through and I did that. I played a warlock in Season of Discovery, because I wanted to be a warlock tank. We'll talk more about that later. But I played a warlock in Season of Discovery, so I took tailoring because I'm a cloth wearer, and I went through the quest. The quest was really cool, and at the end of it, I got to craft an epic item, and it felt amazing. Like, you were never able to craft an epic item at level 25 ever in the history of WoW, and being able to go through and get your materials and like every step felt like you were working towards something. Like, you leveled up the profession and then you crafted kind of like the base version of the item, at least for tailoring. I can't speak to the leatherworking and the blacksmithing, but for tailoring, it was a pair of boots, and you crafted the blue version of the boots, and then you embarked on a quest to get the materials to turn your blue boots into a purple pair of boots. And dude, it was so good. Like, they did such a good job with it. I didn't really care about professions for most of the time that I played Classic WoW, and in Phase 1 of Season of Discovery, I leveled up every single profession all the way to the cap, which was not very high, but that was the reason why I leveled them up to begin with. I even leveled up fishing. Like, I never cared about fishing. I never gave a single damn about fishing for like the 20 years I played WoW, and this is the first time ever that I've actually spent time and leveled it up. And I gotta be honest, it was fun. I had a good time. And them adding an epic chase for professions, I think, was one of the smartest things they could have done, because it gives you something to do other than just the normal dungeon grind. And it also requires you to do difficult content like the raid, which means that you're kind of pigeonholed into doing everything, but in the best way. Instead of like being forced into doing it and it's really tedious and boring, you're kind of forced into doing it because you want to do it, which is a completely different experience than you normally have in games especially in games that are more new, and their live service model is kind of made to appease the investors, so that fear of missing out factor is the thing that keeps you going in to do the thing. It wasn't like that this time. It wasn't like that with the professions. All right, I'm gonna let Tim cook.
Josh will get into that more down the line. But some of the play spaces have had some changes. For people who aren't familiar with the Grubbus and Chomper encounter, you might notice that there are some radiation vents that weren't here. Those will perhaps play a part.
I think those are the green things you're seeing right here, the green puffs of smoke. I imagine that will be part of the boss mechanic. You'll probably either have to switch on the radiation or switch it off, or possibly like tank a mob over into the radiation to do something with the encounter. That's kind of cool.
Part in this.
I didn't mean to full screen it. It almost gives, if you guys played Wrath of the Lich King, it almost gives kind of Ulduar vibes with Mimiron, and that was like a gnome boss that was basically like a mech. He himself was like made out of mech materials. I don't know how to say it. Like, he was like a tiny Gundam, right? And then he had like a giant mech version of himself that he was able to, like, during the fight, he was able to bring different pieces of himself together to eventually become like a full-size giant robot. And if you defeated him, sometimes you got his head to drop, which was like a flying helicopter. That was super dope. Anyway, it kind of gives Mimiron vibes from Ulduar, if you guys ever played that.
Encounter. Crowd Pummeler is now in a different part of the instance. I wonder what kind of mechanic something that punches you really hard might have to do with being on a platform.
So it looks like if you don't tank him in the correct place, you're going to get knocked off of this platform and probably fall to your death. It seems to be raised pretty high, so I imagine the mechanic here is going to be tank him directly in the center, because if he's not directly in the center and you get punched, you're going to go flying off the platform.
Above Pit of Death? Who knows? And there's a lot of excited onlookers ready for you to take on this robot. And Psychothermoplug, last boss of the instance, may have added some additional mechanical suits with different properties to his arsenal.
Okay, so if you look in the background here, again, this is giving that kind of Mimron from Ulduar vibes. It looks like he's going to, like Iron Man, be swapping out into his different suits that will probably have different mechanics for each of them. This one looks like it's kind of irradiated, so I wonder if we'll see, in the same way that games like to be, they like to kind of lead you into the final boss. This is the final boss, if you guys didn't know. So in the same way that games kind of lead you into the mechanics of the final boss by introducing you to soft versions of them in previous encounters, I wonder if this will kind of be that, where we saw the radiation vents in the previous slide. But also, if you look at this, if you look at the kind of aesthetics of the room, these are faces. These are gnome faces kind of built all around here. You might not have seen it originally, but this is like a gnome face with a little mustache, and that's cute, dude. I like that. That's funny.
And you'll have to face off against those as well. Getting into a preview of the exciting loot, there's some nods to old items. I think that one people will notice is the automatic crowd pummeler.
Jesus, that's a lot of items. The automatic crowd pummeler is this mace right here. The stats on this are ridiculous, but also, this never happened in the beginning portion of the, in the original release of World of Warcraft. There was not support for these different druid forms. So if you're not familiar, the cat, the bear, the dire bear forms, these are all shape-shifting forms for the druid, and the feral druid, which is the type of druid that would be a shapeshifter. The feral druid kind of just didn't really exist in Classic. Like, if you played a druid, like, you could level up as feral if you wanted to, but there were no feral druids in raids. Like, druids were only healers. And one thing that they've done really well here in Season of Discovery is kind of tried to push people into the specs that maybe were not as popular, and kind of do things to make those specs more viable in, not in, like, the end game, you know, and quote-unquote end game content, because they just didn't exist before. Like, no one played these classes at all because they were so bad that you would get laughed out of the room if you showed up as a cat or as a bear, right? Like, and to a lesser extent a bear. Like, bear was still decent, but you would never be a main tank. You would always be, you know, you would always be a lesser version of a warrior.
No longer will you have to get individual manual crowd pummelers. You'll be able to pick up one and then use it over and over again with the cooldown. So hopefully that's a great quality of life.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. It says, so this is a mace, but it has a use effect, so you can use it like it's an item, and you can increase your attack speed by 50% for 30 seconds. And, okay, so the reason that's really good is not just because you can use it as the cat or the bear or the dire bear. That part's really good. But before, when you used the item, it actually used up the item, and that was the last time you could use it. Like, it disappeared your item for you if you used the actual on-use effect. So that's pretty dope. But the thing that makes it really awesome is the fact that you can, it's a two-handed mace, right? But you can use it as a shaman, and shaman traditionally would be a dual-wield class, but they have this ability where they drop a totem, or they put an enchant on their weapon even, and the enchant will make them, every now and then when they swing, it will make them swing 2 more times really fast, right? But you used 2 weapons at the time, except for in the most niche of cases. You used 2 weapons at a time, so those swings, those extra swings, would hit, but they wouldn't hit that hard. But with this, you can essentially get a lesser version of that for 30 seconds by using the item, but it's a two-hander, which means it will slap. It's actually a kind of a fast two-hander, so maybe the damage of it won't be that high, and maybe the fact that it is kind of fast, like if you look down here, this is a mace as well. This Gear Mender's Grace is a mace as well, but the speed is 2.5, which means that the speed, and this is a caster mace, so you likely, like most classes, probably won't be using it as a DPS weapon, except for maybe paladins. But the thing about the speed is that the slower the speed, the harder the hit, right? So for a two-handed weapon, you would expect its speed to be slow, like this 2.5, or even this one over here is a 2.4. Both of these are maces. All 3 of these are maces even. So, like, as a 2.0 speed, it's already swinging pretty fast, but then you can make it even faster. I think that's cool. I know there's going to be a two-handed enhancement thing for a shaman later on that they're going to talk about, which we'll talk about that here in the runes section, but I wanted to point that out because if this is as good as I think it's going to be, this is going to be like the weapon for shaman to pick up, for two-handed shaman to pick up, because of its on-use effect. A 3-minute cooldown is not that long. You're going to be able to really do some damage with this thing, even though it's kind of fast.
Improvement. There's also some fun items that you can pick up. The Trog Transfigurator 3000, little Orb of Deception style transforming into a Trog. Aragriar's Whimsical World Warper. Play around with it. See where it takes you in the world.
This is funny. This is like a teleporter, and it will take you to a random place in the world. Traditionally, it will take, like, these kinds of items will take you, like, to one place, and, like, you'll kind of land there most of the time. And then every now and then, it will teleport you into the sky in a place, and you'll just fall to your death. And so, I'll be interested to see where you fall to your death this time. You know what I mean? And for all of the people who are playing Season of Discovery as hardcore, I bet you they don't use this item at all.
And some fun cosmetic items as well.
Dude, look at the sunglasses. The words "deal with it" are etched into the side. That's classic, dude. That's hilarious.
Here's a look at our set items. You can see that some set items actually have specific set bonuses for some classes. Okay, so these are for warriors and paladins. These are for all of your cloth classes, like your warlocks, your mages, your priests, and then the male classes, which it's interesting that they didn't show the leather one, but the male classes, which would be your hunters and your shaman, all of these look pretty good off the start, but these are set bonuses, which is something that if you guys are Destiny players, this is something that I have advocated for in Destiny for the longest time, and I wish that dropped in Destiny raids, where you get the piece of armor, and the different pieces of armor that drop from the raid, the more of them you equip, the more of these bonuses you get to unlock. I love that. And, like, there are some that do have something like that, but the bonus is always so minimal that it really doesn't matter. But these, in WoW, specifically in Season of Discovery, they've done a really good job making these set bonuses, like, desirable to more than just one type of character. So, like, for the plate-wearing classes, the warriors and the paladins, you can see that wearing 2 from this hazard set will increase your defense stat by 7, and that reduces the amount of times that you get critically hit without you having to invest into talent points that do the same thing, which frees you up to put your talent points into either more defensive cooldowns or more defensive options, or you can put them into more offensive options to generate more threat, and that's really good. But in addition to that, you also get 16 attack power, which seems like it would be low, but 16 attack power for free is actually a pretty decent bonus. That's like half a piece of gear worth of attack power just for equipping 2 of this set. And then you can see on the, looks like both the hazard set for plate wearers and the cloth set have an increased chance for you to hit. And that also, same thing, will decrease the amount of talent points you have to invest into your ability to hit things that are higher level than you, which the raid mobs are going to be higher level than you, so this is like the most important stat in the game, because if you miss, your ability deals 0 damage, and that is like an enormous hit to your DPS. So the more... My dog is barking. Hopefully nobody's just taking my ear off, making sure my daughter's not calling me. I think we're good. So the more hit that you have on your gear, the easier it is for you to continue on DPSing and top the damage meters. And then also for the cloth set, you can see that the armor stat is green, which means that the armor is actually higher than a normal piece of cloth. And the 2 set bonus down here actually gives you a plus 100 armor, so it takes this from a 145 armor to a 245 armor, and the reason that's significant is because the Warlock tank has... Excuse me. Since my lung surgery, it really hurts to burp.
I have titanium staples in both of my lungs now, and it really hurts to burp, dude. So I gotta do it in a stupid way. Anyway, the Warlock tank, which was just introduced in Phase 1 of Season of Discovery, has a multiplicative armor bonus when you go into its tank form. And because of that, you want things with additional armor. So you get additional armor off the start just for having the piece, and then you also get a set bonus which gives you even more armor on top of that, and that's going to make it like top tier for Warlock tanks. But then on top of that, it also gives you things for other classes that other classes care about, like increased damage to your healing, or damage and healing to your spells even, and then also increasing your chance to hit. And then for the 3 set bonus, you have a chance on spellcast to increase your damage and healing by up to 40, which is essentially like having an additional cooldown, which you can pop in the middle of a fight, except this one will just happen without you ever having to do something, which is really good. All of these set bonuses look pretty solid. And then for the male class, you can see that your attacks have a chance of restoring 100 mana, and if you know what it's like to play a hunter or a shaman at the higher levels, the bane of your existence, the most annoying thing that you can possibly run into is running out of mana, because then all of a sudden you are completely useless. And the hunter later got moved to, instead of a mana class, it got moved to like a different resource generation in later expansions in WoW, because of this, because it felt so bad to run out of mana as a hunter. So them adding this as a set bonus, even though it's just a 5% chance, that's going to proc enough times that it's going to kind of smooth out their DPS rotation. And all of these set bonuses look pretty good. And you can see equipping it also restores 4 mana per 5 seconds, which is going to double down on the effect of kind of smoothing out everything to make the class just feel better to play. That's an incredible quality of life change.
And we also have tokens now that will drop instead of having a gigantic loot list that contains all of the set pieces, and you're getting frustrated if the same set piece drops for a different class every week. We've introduced set piece tokens that can be used by everyone.
Is it going to be $100 DLC good? I would not be surprised if this is $100 DLC good, because the Phase 1 of Season of Discovery, I think, was definitely worth more than the box price of literally just subscribing to the game. Like, the cool thing about this is that it doesn't actually cost you any money aside from just the subscription, which it is a subscription-based model, so you do have to pay monthly to play World of Warcraft, right? But that's not that big of a deal when you factor in that you paid $100 for Destiny's year-long DLC, and you played it, most people played it for like a month or two after Lightfall came out, and then they came back here and there, right? But, you know, for the most part, they kind of let Destiny be what Destiny was, and they played it for a little while here and there. So, like, did you get your $100 worth? It's a little bit harder to say, right? But in the interest of saving you money, the Phase 1 and Phase 2 of Season of Discovery being 0 buy-in, aside from just subscribing to the game, is possibly one of its greatest selling points, in my opinion, because you don't want to pay extra money to play a game that you, like, upon perception, without having actually played it, you look at it and you think, this game came out in 2004, why do I give a shit, right? But in all actuality, it's a better designed RPG because it was made in a time where people didn't have to appease the investors and keep you playing for a set number of hours every week to make sure that their boss didn't get mad at them. Like, it literally was just a game that was created to be a really good game. And I think because of that, it completely changes the landscape of who the game was made for and who the game was made by. The mindset was completely different. The way that we consumed media in 2004 was completely different. And so the game is just designed to be a really good game. And then they added on top of that to further iterate and make it an even better game. And again, it doesn't have those kind of traps that keep you playing for a long period of time, even though it's not fun. Like, even though you're just doing it because you want the thing at the end, but all of these tedious steps to get to that thing, to keep you logged in for an extra 2 hours every week, even though you don't even want to be doing that, and I think that is maybe its best selling point. $15 to play the expansion, or to play the new phase, is such a minimal buy-in compared to some other games. and you will play it. Like, the progression system is so good that when you start the character and you start off as like, I'm just some guy in a place, and then you work your way up and you're like, now I'm some guy with a sword. And then later you're like, now I'm some guy with a sword, a shield, and a suit of armor. And then eventually you're like, I'm a blacksmith. I've done this raid. I have some incredible items. Like, I have this legendary weapon. I have this legendary helmet. Like, I went on a quest across the world and crafted this incredible, like, pair of, like, pants or chest piece or something like that. And, like, the progression system is so much better than you would see in a regular RPG nowadays. And the fact that they're iterating on it and there's going to be more phases beyond phase 1, and this next phase goes up to level 40, so it's not even the end, dude. Like, this is just the next part. Like, it's so good. It is genuinely so good and so worth the buy-in. Okay, now to hit on the thing that he was just talking about, they're gonna have tokens within the raid, so that if you miss out on the piece of item that you, like the piece of gear that you were looking for, and you play the raid, let's say you play the raid, I don't know, 7 times, and the item that you want drops twice, but both of those times, your raid leader gives it to one of his buddies because he's his buddy and you don't know this guy, you just found him on LFG. You can actually get these tokens and turn the token in to get the piece of raid gear that you actually wanted, which is not something, you don't see that in games nowadays. Like, literally in any RPG, in any live service game that comes out now, specifically live service, not in any RPG, right? Like, it's not going to be an Elden Ring or something like that, or Baldur's Gate, but like, in any live service game that comes out now, if you don't get the piece of loot that you want, you're out of luck, bro. You gotta come back next week. And they want you to come back next week because that's how they pay their investors, you know? And like, they have no incentive to give you a new avenue to get that piece of loot. So these kind of tokens just simply don't exist in gaming right now. Nobody does this anymore because they need you to log in, because if you don't log in, they don't have a game. And that's not the case here.
For a specific piece of your armor. So you can pick, if whoever loots the boot token will be able to turn that into a vendor to redeem it for their set piece boots. With Gnomeregan, there's a couple updates that we're making to dungeons. The first of which are the addition of quality of life skill books. These are skill books that have a chance to drop off of certain creatures in 5-man dungeons, and they add significant quality of life spells to your arsenal that don't take up a rune slot.
This is unprecedented. Okay, so as games have gone on, as WoW has progressed through the years, they have learned things about these different classes, and they've learned what these classes need to be good. And, like, they've learned where the pain points are of playing these classes that make it not fun, right? And you can see here that I don't know as much. I don't know what enhanced blessings is. I assume it's duration. I assume because the blessings are like a low duration here in Classic WoW. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I do know about these two. So for a shaman, they are like they're a class. They put down totems. The totems give incredibly powerful buffs, but the totems are stationary. And the problem with that is that if you have to move in a fight, like if you drop a totem that's like a healing totem, and then you have to move over there, that healing totem can't affect you and your party anymore. And it feels bad, dude. Like, it's a feels bad moment if you use your stuff and then you gotta move away from it, and now effectively the cooldown that you had, the part of your class that made your class good, is completely useless. That has been solved in later expansions by this ability right here called Totemic Projection. And essentially what that does is it lets you put your totems over there, or over there at range, right? And so like if you know that you're gonna have to move in a few seconds, but you need that totem right now, you can place it like halfway between where you are right now and where you gotta go. And then in that way, as your raid team continues to move, you guys will be able to get the effect of the totem as you're kind of moving into the next spot. That's a huge quality of life upgrade for Shaman. And the fact that they're adding it to the game without having it take a rune slot, and if you don't know about the runes, that's how they took abilities that made sense for these classes and they added them to the base game of WoW. So like you can it's like enchanting your gear. If you got a pair of gloves, you can slap a rune on that pair of gloves, and now you have a new ability from a later expansion that made the class that you're playing really good, right? But these are skill books that are not going to require a rune slot at all. You just learn them, and once you learn them, now you have this ability. So for Shaman, the totemic projection is such a massive portion of your class, because if you, like I said, if you put your totem right here and you got to go that way, it feels bad. It completely ruins your healing or your damage or what have you. And so being able to place them at range is huge. And then for the rogues use combo points, and the combo point system is target based. So if you're targeting, let's say there's like one guy and then there's a different dude, right? You're targeting the one guy and you get your combo points up to 5, and then now it's time, now this guy goes immune, right? And now you lost a massive amount of damage because you put 5 combo points on that guy and he became immune right at the moment where you were about to use your finisher, which is like I built up these combo points, now I'm going to consume all of them and get a gigantic effect, right? Sometimes that's damage, sometimes it's something else, but that's essentially how it works, right? Well, this redirect ability was introduced in later expansions, and what it basically allows you to do is pick a new target and send your combo points to that guy. And the reason that's so good is because if you lose out on your combo points, especially if you have 5 of them, which is the max amount of combo points you can have, if you lose out on your combo points, you miss out on a gigantic portion of your damage. And if that happens multiple times throughout a fight, you're like, you on the DPS charts, you're just way at the bottom, dude. Like, you just suck balls now. So the ability to learn redirect and send your combo points where you need them to go, assuming that you didn't put them, you didn't execute amazingly, right? Because we're all human, dude. We don't always press the right buttons at the right time. And redirect kind of allows you to have that buffer where it's like, oh shit, now the guy I was fighting just died before I got to use my finisher on him. I'm gonna send my combo points to this other dude, and then I'm gonna use my big damage finisher on that guy. And this is huge. This is enormous. I'm glad that they're adding these, but the fact that they're adding them without taking a rune slot means that you're going to be able to use all of the cool things while also having all of the quality of life things. And again, this is unprecedented for games nowadays. Games nowadays would force you to choose between the cool thing or the thing that makes your life easier. And this is huge, dude. This is massive.
So we're excited for people to get their hands on these, and hopefully these solve some problems that players have been facing, such as short aura durations with paladin blessings.
I was right. It's for the short aura. It's for the short duration of the auras that paladins give. They give like really good buffs, but they last for like 2 minutes. And like 2 minutes is no time in WoW. You're gonna have to refresh that over and over again. I was right. I wasn't sure what this was. That's what it is.
Totem control as shaman, rogues being able to have a spell that allows them to manipulate what target their combo points are on, as well as many, many others that we're excited for players to find when they jump into Phase 2. And I'd like to pass off the presentation to Nora to talk more about rune abilities. Thank you very much.
Hey, my name's Nora.
I didn't mean to full screen it. I just want to say thank you to Tim, because that was incredible, Tim. Thank you so much. I said this earlier, but when I pulled up this video, this is the first time I've ever watched this. When I pulled up this video, I did not know it was going to be a slideshow. I expected it to be more like, I don't know, human. I expected there to be some people talking, and not that there aren't people talking, but like some faces I could, put a face to the name even. But I'm not mad about the slideshow presentation style. It just feels a little bit different than I thought it was going to be.
Valletta, and I'm a lead software engineer on WoW Classic. The team is very excited for you to head out and find those new rune abilities coming soon in Phase 2 of Season of Discovery.
I want to talk about the rune abilities real quick, because the rune abilities, not only do they add cool mechanics that they have figured out in later expansions are actually good for your class, and core mechanics to how you actually play these classes, but I want to talk specifically about the way you found rune abilities in Phase 1. They added these things to the game. They added new things to the game that you just went out in the world and found on your own. Like, so in the first couple of days, I have to burp again, and it's gonna hurt me, so give me a second. Oh, don't get lung surgery if you can help it. In the first couple of days of the phase, of phase 1, there were these places throughout the world where just new things that didn't exist in the base version of the game popped up. And people were like, what is this? And then they go and they complete the objective, or they, there was like a frozen murloc at certain points, and they were like, well, what do we do with this, guy who's encased in a block of ice? And then they found out that, oh, if you use fire spells on this thing, and you put enough fire spells on this thing, you can actually break him out of the ice, and then kick his ass, and it will drop a rune for your class. And and you can't do it on your own, so you need a couple of people who are there all using fire spells at the same time, and that way you can get the new rune. And there was all these different things kind of spread throughout the world in different places that you might not expect to look. So if you were playing blind and you had played the base version of the game, there was legitimately new things for you to find. And I think, that is, again, I talked about this earlier, that is hitting on nostalgia in the best possible way. Like, you can't hit on nostalgia better than having new stuff in the game if you introduce the same world, or like the same zone, or like, in Destiny's case, the same raid, and you don't change anything, it doesn't feel like a new experience, even though there's new perks on the weapons, or like there's new pieces of loot to chase. It doesn't feel new. So the way that they put these rune abilities in, and you legitimately went out and discovered them on your own, which for me, I played like half blind, because like I said, I just did this like 2 weeks ago, so it's fresh for me. I played like half blind, and then once I found like a few of these runes, I was like, okay, I'm hooked. I need to know where all the runes are, and then I pulled it up on the internet and I went and found the rest of them with a guide. Look, I'm not ashamed to admit it. All right, everybody had already found the runes on their own. There was plenty of guides out there. A lot of people looked it up, but I did find some of them at the beginning on my own, and it was really cool. And I love the way that they did that. I'm excited to see where the new stuff is for phase 2, and like what new things they implement into the game, because we're going to be able to go into zones that in phase 1 we were too low of a level to actually enter. Like, we would just die. Like, the mobs are too high of a level. They just come up and one hit us, or like two hit us. Like, so they're like, in these new zones, there's going to be new opportunities for them to put something in that is actually like innovative, and I think that's awesome. Okay, Nora.
I'm here to give you a sneak peek at some of those abilities, so let's dive in. Paladins. Sheath of Light will cause damage dealt with your melee weapon to also increase your spell power. It'll also cause your critical heals to apply an additional heal over time on the target. Guarded by the Light will cause your melee weapon hits to restore mana over time. However, the amount healed by Flash of Light, Holy Light, and Holy Shock will be reduced by half.
Okay. This is, again, I'm not going to watch this entire video. We're just going to I'll skip through some of these classes, but I wanted to specifically talk about the Paladin, because the Paladin has a spec that was completely absent from the base version of the game, which it's called Retribution. It's a two-handed damage dealer spec for a Paladin, and Retribution sucked balls throughout the entirety of Classic World of Warcraft. Like, if you showed up as a Retribution Paladin, you failed at character creation, bro. Why didn't you just roll a warrior? It didn't make any sense. The spec was not supported at all, and there was gear that was kind of like, maybe it could have been for them, but a lot of the gear that Paladins ended up wearing, and this is a plate-wearing class, a lot of them just ended up wearing cloth gear, and Paladins were essentially just healers. And that has been kind of taken to a new level here in Season of Discovery, and the reason that's cool is because they are implementing ways to actually give support to these specs, to these types of characters that previously did not have any support. And because of that, they're adding breadth to the game, like the space for you to live out your character power fantasy is becoming greater the more of these runes and the more pieces of gear that they add, because these specs that previously did not exist in any type of real sense. And I talked about this earlier with feral druids, the ones that shapeshift into bears and cats and stuff like that. Paladins had a similar problem with their retribution spec, where like you just didn't play a retribution paladin. Like some people would play it, and like I said, they'd get laughed out of the room. Nobody wanted you on their team. You were terrible at damage, and you were also terrible at your own job, which was like, you know, being a mana using, plate wearing, a two-handed weapon wielding class. Like you just weren't good. And this stuff is directly representative of how they are taking a spec that sucks balls and turning it into a spec that is viable, with just a few minor tweaks. And if you look at this one, you can see that the Sheath of Light rune is actually beneficial to more than just the Retribution Paladin, because it's also beneficial to the Holy Paladin, which is the healer version of the class. You can see the direct damage with your melee weapon increases your spell power, which they have certain spells that will deal damage, and these spells, because the melee paladin invests so heavily into attack power, they don't actually invest into spell power, and their spells suffer because of that, so like now their auto attacks, their regular melee swings get better, but the abilities that they're actually using do not get better, and that kind of divide is part of what made them bad, and this is kind of making up for that. But in addition to that, it also helps with the healing paladin, because the critical heal spells heal the target for 60% of the healed amount over 12 seconds. That's a heal over time, and not only does that work for you, which is really good for the melee paladin, who is going to be taking a lot of damage because, like I said, they're just not the most viable class of all time. But it also helps with the healer paladin, because it gives them an additional way to heal beyond them just straight up casting a spell on you, which is pretty much the only way they could heal in Classic WoW. They were incredibly potent healers, but their heals used a lot of mana, and they had to be kind of casting the spell on you at that moment. I don't think they even have a heal over time at all. So for this to have critical heals give 60% of the healed amount over 12 seconds, that's huge. So it affects 2 specs. And then you look at this Guided by the Light. Earlier I had talked about how the mail-wearing classes had a problem with mana, and insofar as that running out of mana effectively made you useless. Well, this Guarded by the Light rune gives you 5% of your maximum mana per 3 seconds for 15 seconds. So you actually get to kind of smooth out that gameplay loop by using this, and this is specifically made for the Retribution Paladin, the Damage Dealer Paladin, and you can tell that because the amount of your heals is actually reduced by 50% while your mana is regenerating. So they do it in a way that makes it, it's kind of like the Kiss Curse mentality, right? So you have the really good buff, but at the same time, it's also shitting on a different part of you. So you got to kind of use it in the right way. And this is also useful for the healer paladin, because the 50% reduced mana, or reduced potency of your heals, that can be exploited at certain times during certain fights, where you can be like, hey, I know I don't have to heal a lot right now. This is a good time for me to regenerate mana. And you can also just cancel the buff when that time runs out. So like you could just go up and right click the buff and take it off of you, and now you're back to full potency of your heals. This is a really good thing, not just for the Retribution Paladin, but also for the Holy Paladin, and to a lesser extent for the Protection Paladin. This right here is maybe the best one for protection, because Protection Paladins probably are not using their heals during a fight. So this kind of doesn't, the curse aspect of this kind of doesn't affect them at all. The tank version of the Paladin can utilize this as a mana regeneration effect without having to worry about the reduction to the amount that their heals do. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward through. We got the Hunter, we got the Warrior. I want to talk about the Warrior real quick, because I thought the Warrior, I did see this in the preview earlier. The Warrior currently is dealing a crazy amount of damage. Like a ridiculous amount of damage in the Black Fathom Deeps raid, and like an absurd amount of warriors are topping the charts right now. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but so kind of this is how warriors worked in Classic version of WoW. You scaled really well with gear, so the better your gear was, the more unstoppable you became. So warriors kind of started off as like a really high version of potential, right? So they had like incredibly high potential, but they weren't necessarily meeting that potential in the gear that they had equipped. So as you're leveling your warrior, you're like, man, I can't wait to get to level 60, because when I get to level 60, it's going to be over for these hoes. And like they delivered on that value proposition in the beginning in Classic WoW. As soon as they got to 60, they got geared up. The warrior was pretty unstoppable. Like they did not miss. And when I say they didn't miss, like, obviously they built into hits, so they didn't literally miss, but like they smacked, dude. Like they were top of the damage. The more gear you had, the more unstoppable you became. Warriors are probably the best class at level 60. But because of the implementation of the runes in phase 1 and the gear from the raid, they actually kind of reached those heights maybe a little sooner than they should have. And because of that, I feel like warriors will probably get balanced down a little bit, because if they're already at the top of every DPS chart, if they're already like so good that they can't be touched, what's going to happen when we make it to the end of Season of Discovery and they have like way more gear than they had in the original version of the game, and they scale to ridiculous heights? It's like warriors have to be kind of balanced down a little bit from where they were in phase 1. And if you notice with this rune, instead of them getting a new ability that really increases how much damage they deal, which, I mean, they do have that with Blood Surge, right? But the other rune that they're getting, at least in this preview, is a raid buff. And the raid buff does not necessarily increase the warrior's power, but gives them more viability inside of high-level content, which is arguably better, because that way they don't have to continue to balance them down. Because nothing feels worse than spending all this time getting your character geared up, and then you get hit with the nerf bat, and now you're not as good as you were. So I think this was a smart move on Blizzard's part, giving them a utility ability instead of directly giving them more power over and over again, because they're already at the point that they're pretty much at the point where they would have been at the max level already. And the level cap was 25, the max level was 60, so it could snowball very easily from here. So you got to be careful with how good your warriors can get. This was a good change on their part. I'm going to fast forward to the shaman. I want to hear them kind of talk about the shaman.
Maelstrom weapon causes damage dealt with melee.
Just going to back up just a little bit.
Only hold this energy for a short.
To touch on mages really fast, like really, really fast, because I only played with a few mages. Having mages that can heal was such a smart move on Blizzard's part. Such a smart move to allow them to break out of their normal spec constraints where they can only be a damage dealer, because people want to play a mage, but they don't want to be like stuck in the role of only a damage dealer, and making them be able to heal, especially at a low level, was very cool.
Shamans. Maelstrom weapon causes damage dealt with melee attacks to have a chance to reduce the cast time of your next lightning bolt, chain lightning, lesser healing wave, chain heal, or lava burst spell by 20%. The cast time reduction can stack up to 5 times.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about Shaman because they are one of the underperforming classes in terms of damage. They're kind of down near the bottom of the meters, but I don't think there's ever been a time in Warcraft's history where Shaman have been like the best DPS spec in the entire game. And because of that, like, you absolutely want to give them the things that make them competitive as quickly as possible. In phase 1 of Season of Discovery, they allowed Shaman to break out of their normal spec constraints, like I talked about with mages who could heal. Shaman could now tank for the first time in WoW's history, and the ability to tank as a shaman is huge because the enhancement spec, which was previously a melee DPS spec, kind of got to be something more than what it was, so it didn't have to top the meters because they could instead be a tank. And that was a really cool thing. And they couldn't implement all of the things that they needed to make Shaman extremely viable super quickly, because if they did, then they would kind of put them at a severe advantage compared to other classes. So they kind of need to roll these things out a little bit at a time. especially for the classic version of Enhancement Shaman, who gets access to an incredibly powerful buff in Wind Fury. So, which is like the, I talked about this earlier, it's the thing where they swing, and sometimes they swing, and then they swing 2 more times super fast. That is very, very powerful because it doesn't have a cap in Classic WoW. So you can actually proc that off of itself, and sometimes you'll swing 1 time, and then you'll swing 2 more times, and then it'll proc again, and you'll swing 2 more times, and then it can proc a 3rd time, and you can see how this could snowball very quickly. But the way that they did this with Maelstrom Weapon, and this is the way it's implemented, I'm pretty sure this is the same way that's implemented in the regular game anyway, but it buffs every single spec for Shaman completely across the board, whether you're a healer, whether you're a ranged spellcaster, or you're a melee DPS, or you're a tank, it doesn't matter. Literally every single spec of Shaman gets a massive buff with Maelstrom Weapon, because it turns your spells, and you don't get a lot of them, but over time, you get to use spells that traditionally would stop you from doing what you're doing, and you get to use them as instant casts. So, like, in a case where your group might need to be healed, if you're like a spellcaster, or you're like a damage dealer, or even if you're a tank, right? And you can see that your team is taking a lot of damage, you can use your stacked up 5 stacks of Maelstrom Weapon to drop a heal on maybe like your lowest health target in your team, or like if your whole team is taking a lot of damage, you can use a chain heal, which will heal everyone that's close by. Or if you're a damage dealer shaman, you can use it for lightning bolt, or in AoE situations, you can use it for chain lightning, and it will instant cast instead of you interrupting your melee DPS swings to cast it, like hard cast it, or and for the spellcaster shaman, doing it as an instant cast is essentially a massive buff to your DPS, because you take something that is previously like a 2-second cast time and you turn it into an instant cast ability. Now all of a sudden you're cranking out damage way faster than you were before. And for the spellcaster shaman, they also have a rune that makes it so that sometimes when they cast a spell, it double casts the spell. So like that can proc off of these Maelstrom things. So imagine, you're hard casting your lightning bolt, you're 2-second cast time, lightning bolt, 2-second cast time again, and then you got your 5 stacks. Now you cast the lightning bolt instantly, and then your rune procs, and now you double cast a lightning bolt. That's a lot of damage. It stacks up very quickly, and it also allows for a massive amount of utility across the board, because if the fight can change on a dime, right? You never know when you might need a certain spell, and shaman who have access to an incredibly wide variation of spells, you can see, like, the lightning bolt is a single target damage spell, the chain lightning is an AoE target damage spell, lesser healing wave is a small heal, but healing wave is a large heal, both single target, or chain heal, which is an AoE heal. Like, all of these things, this is an enormous amount of utility, and to be able to have it as an instant cast is massive. I understand why they waited until Phase 2 to put this in, because it's literally that good. Like, the buff is that good. So you gotta be careful. You gotta be careful about buffing them too much. But you can also use it with Lava Burst, which is like the main single target damage spell of the Spellcaster Shaman, and being able to cast that instantly, in a PvP scenario. If you cast one of those and then your rune procs and it double casts a Lava Burst, you might just one-hit somebody. And that's pretty cool. Feels good, right? Hang on 1 second. I hear talking. No, I think we're good.
Spirit of the...
No, we're good. Gotta make sure, that nobody's in the house. So Spirit of the Alpha Wolf.
30-minute buff that can be cast on a friendly target to increase the threat generated by that target.
Okay, so this is huge because you can cast this on yourself as the Shaman tank. And like I said before, Shaman have never been a class that tops the damage meters. I don't think they've ever, in the history of WoW, been a class that is like, damn, that is the highest damage character I've ever seen in my entire life. And because of that, when they got introduced to the tank role in Phase 1 of Season of Discovery, it can be a little bit difficult for them to maintain threat on targets, because other classes deal so much more damage than they deal, that it makes it difficult for them to maintain the targets actually attacking them. So this is going to make it so that they can cast this on themselves and basically never have to worry about whether or not someone's going to pull aggro off of them. But the cool thing about it is that it's not just for them, so they can also cast it on someone else. So in situations where the tank is maybe falling behind on the threat meter, and you can see that, like maybe if you're the healer, you can have this rune equipped, and you can be like, nah fam, like you can cast it on the tank, and now all of a sudden, he deals way more threat, the mobs see him as way more threatening than anything else. But you can also use it in off-tank scenarios where you're tanking something as the shaman, and you need someone else to kind of take this guy and get him the fuck away from you. So you could be like, hey, I'm gonna put this on, the Warlock, right? Like, I'm gonna put the Spirit of the Alpha buff on the Warlock, and the Warlock is gonna spam his Searing Pain spell, and he's gonna pull aggro off of me because it deals so much more threat than I'm currently able to do, that this mob will just instantly lock onto the Warlock, and you're gonna be good to go. So there's a lot of utility in the Shaman runes. I wanted to touch on that because with the introduction of the tank spec and the ability for them to kind of break out of their mold, both of these previews, both of these runes are going to add an enormous amount of possibility to their gameplay. And if you're a smart player, if you're a good player, and you can understand kind of the flow of the fight and the way that things are kind of happening in real time, you're going to be able to reap the benefits of a lot of cool utility from this. And I think that's super dope.
You can kind of think of it like the opposite of Blessing of Salvation.
All right, we're going to go to PvP updates.
Can't wait for everyone to discover those new runes. They look amazing. Thank you, Nora. Hello, I am Ana Resendes, and I will talk to you about PvP.
Talk to
In
me.
this new level band, we're bringing a new PvP experience to you. You might have seen a little hint on our social media channels about this. So, our new PvP event is called the Blood Moon. The Blood Moon rises in Stranglethorn Vale, bringing with it absolute mayhem. When Ashenvale was created, we talked about how cool it would be for the event to be triggered by player activity in the area.
So, in Phase 1 of Season of Discovery, they added a new PvP event to a zone called Ashenvale, which was the setting for one of the battlegrounds inside of WoW. So, PvP battlegrounds are essentially like you queue into a PvP match like you would in any other PvP game, right? And like the zone that PvP match took place in was Ashenvale. But in the open world, Ashenvale was just like a place where you go and you do quests, right? So they added this new PvP event that was essentially triggered by players doing things in the open world where you would normally just be questing, and then eventually it would get to the point where it was like, holy shit, dude, the PvP is popping off! And like, then all of a sudden, like 100 people from your faction would all flood into the zone, and the chat would be like spammed with like, invite me please, like, can I get an invite? And like, all of a sudden now there's like 100 people who all want to be inside of Ashenvale at the same time. And while that was cool, it, at least on my server, it led to a lot of snowballing for the opposite faction. The Alliance had way more players than the Horde had, and when the Ashenvale PvP event would kick off, they would just destroy us. And I played an undead warlock, so I got to experience this firsthand. You can't, like, you're inside of the zone, and you're just kind of doing your thing, and you're doing your quests or whatever, and then the PvP event kicks off, and you see like 100 enemy Alliance players coming your way, and it's just death. It's just instant death. And there's nothing really that you can do when only 20 Horde guys showed up, and like you're trying to do the event with 20 Horde guys, and the Alliance have 100 people that are coming to absolutely decimate you. While the PvP event was really cool, and it gave you like a new reputation to grind out, which led to a mount that you got to get pretty early. I think the mount was probably the best thing they could have done for the Ashenvale zone, because first of all, it's a huge zone, and you can't get a mount in WoW until level 40, which was outside of the level bracket of Phase 1. So for them to add the mount that you could get, and you could only use it inside of Ashenvale, but it made the ability to do the PvP event a lot more, like, doable, because you couldn't get to the other side of the zone where you needed to be in, like, halfway through the PvP event. Now I gotta be way the fuck over there. But you couldn't do that because you'd have to hoof it, right? Like, you're walking to the other side, and by the time you make it there, the 100 Alliance players have already finished the event for you. So having the mount and having it be available pretty early was actually, like, the thing that made it possible for us to win here and there. And, like, while the Horde didn't win as often because of the disparity in player population, we did get to win a couple of times because all of us had mounts. And also just having the mount felt really cool. Being able to put, like, jump on your wolf, and now you can travel a lot faster, felt a lot better than walking everywhere. I liked the mount aspect. I want to hear more about the Blood Moon in Stranglethorn Vale, but I know that this part right here, large raid groups beware, this is my favorite part, because the worst part about the Ashenvale PvP event was getting destroyed by 100 Alliance players that were all in a group together.
After going through feedback and seeing how Ashenvale played, in this event, we wanted to take a different approach and make it more predictable so you know when the battle will take place. So, the Blood Moon event will happen every 3 hours, and we have a duration of 30 minutes. Believe me, you will be able to tell when the event is happening and bring in a mysterious red fog to the area. During this time, the whole zone will become a free-for-all PvP, meaning allies and enemies alike will be viable targets for your blood rage.
Ooh. Okay, so what she just said is kind of interesting. Inside of the Stranglethorn Vale PvP event, it's free-for-all, which means that you're going to be able to attack your own faction. And, like, I like that and don't like that, because your faction, you all come out of the same base at the same time. So how's that going to work? Like, do you just have to be in the zone before the event starts? Otherwise, you walk out 3 feet into the zone and, like, everybody who is behind you just kills you from behind? Like, how's that going to work out? But I do like that, the free-for-all aspect kind of takes away the ability to be stomped out by the other faction. I'm also concerned with the every 3 hours on a timer aspect, because that is going to put a serious amount of pressure on individuals to be there or not get the event. Like, if this event has things that you really, really want to go for, and it's on a 3-hour timer, how often are you going to be able to hit that 3-hour timer with a duration of only 30 minutes? That raises a little bit of question for me. I think maybe at some point they might want to reduce the timer, maybe make it a little bit less, especially if the event is opt-in. I don't see why they couldn't take it from a 3-hour timer down to like a 2-hour timer, which would effectively increase how much, your possibility to complete the event by like 33%. I feel like 3 hours is a long time in between. And there might not be a lot of opportunity for some people who maybe work at certain times, or have children, or have a social life, or a wife, or what have you. Any actual real life thing that could come up. I feel like a 3-hour timer could put some serious constraints on that, but I guess we're gonna have to see how it goes.
Everyone that is in the zone during this time will become a target. During the event, killing other players will allow you to earn a currency, which can be traded for various rewards. We'll talk about the rewards in a little bit. You can still group up, but be warned, the Blood Moon does not smile to those that battle in raid groups and will punish you for doing so.
It's interesting, the idea that you're gonna get punished for being in a raid group. I wonder what that means. I wonder, like, what implementation they could do to, like, actually, like, punish you for being in a raid group. And, like, a raid group is, like, more than 5 people. So if you go out and you're in a group of more than 5, obviously you would stomp in a free-for-all scenario, you would stomp any player who is playing by themselves. Even in a group of 5, you would stomp any player that is playing by themselves. So that kind of sucks that it's free-for-all. And I wonder, I really am interested to see what they do to discourage you from grouping. And also, I want to touch on the fact that the currency is gained by killing other players. Because, like, what if you're a healer, dude? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what if you're a tank and you go into this event? Like, how are you going to kill people? What do you do in those scenarios? If the only way to get the currency is killing other players, I feel like that kind of limits who can do it. But anyway, let's keep listening.
There are those, of course, who refuse to give in the thirst of the blood. If it's peace what you seek, you can opt out of the event at any time by talking to the Sandalari emissary. You will not be able to earn any rewards if you opt out, and remember that General Realm PvP zone rules will still apply.
I do like that you can opt out, though. I think opting out is like a very important part of any PvP event that breaks out in a zone that you're just doing quests in. Because if you're just out there doing quests and you're just trying to have a chill time, you know, maybe you're drinking a beer or you're having a snack or something like that, and you don't really like, you're not trying to get into the Blood Moon PvP. You just want to level your character, or you're out there picking flowers, leveling your herbalism, right? Or you're out there like skinning tigers, leveling up your skinning. Like maybe you don't care about PvP right now. So the ability to opt out of it is incredibly important, and I'm glad they added that.
Another big difference from Ashenvale is that there won't be any PvE objectives. That said, not only should you be wary of both enemies and allies alike, you should also keep an eye out for the Chosen of the Blood Loa, who will absolutely destroy you. Does Fell River ring a bell?
Okay, so the way that she said, does Fell River ring a bell, leads me to believe that this Chosen of the Blood Loa, which they're intentionally obscuring the image of, but I imagine is going to be like a giant red troll. And when I say giant, I mean like the size of a building red troll, kind of like stomping around the zone. Fell River was a mob that they added in the first expansion of WoW called the Burning Crusade, and it was like a gigantic mech, like a gigantic evil mech that walked around the first questing zone, and if you got seen by the Fell Reaver, he would walk up and step on you, and that would be the end of your life. He would just one-hit you, because he was way higher level than you, and he dealt way more damage than you had health. So if this Chosen of the Blood Loa guy is doing the same thing, I wonder, like, first of all, that's fun. It's fun to have, like, a big scary thing in the zone, and, like, you see it, and it actually, like, incites fear within you. That's fun and cool, and I do like that. I wonder if this is the discouraging factor of, like, don't group up. Like, I wonder if this guy will be, like, trained onto people, like, he'll be more likely to find groups of people. I think that'd be really cool.
So, you might be wondering, how do I get my hands on that sweet rewards? There will be a merchant outside of Gurabashi Arena that would assist you with this. What about the rewards? Well, there are a dozen of new class-specific item rewards. Here are some examples of the new rewards that come with the event.
This is a specific to Mage's Ring, which is specific to Fire Mages, because it increases the damage done by fire spells in effect by up to 16. While I think that is very cool, I'll be interested to see if the gear that is specific to classes is good across the board, because like having class-specific gear means that if it's not good, you probably don't care about the event at all. So it's very important for it to be like really good. And this is a very good piece of gear. Don't get me wrong. Also, it's a ring, which is not typical of a thing that you would see inside of like a regular event. Not only that, but it is an epic ring. It's purple in quality, which means that the stats on this ring compared to even the tier below it are so much higher that it will be a significant damage upgrade or, output upgrade no matter what class you are. We also have a warrior-specific one-handed mace here, which has a large amount of strength and a good amount of agility. And this looks like it's a PvP gain, like it's a weapon that you go into PvP for, but you use as a tank. And I think that's interesting because, while like tanking is pretty specific to PvE activities, so I wonder why they would add why they would add one of the best weapons in the game for warriors as a tank into a PvP event, kind of forcing you into PvP when you might just be a PvE player.
Additionally, there are new quests that will help with your Arathi Basin reputation journey. Do you want to see more about the cool rewards? What about a new car? Well, okay, not exactly a car, but yeah.
Okay, I love that they're adding another mount. I talked about this earlier, but I really enjoyed having a mount inside of Ashenvale. I think it's super dope that they are adding a mount inside of Stranglethorn Vale. I like the raptor. I think that's very cool. I don't know why there's a gnome on the raptor, but the fact that there is a gnome on the raptor leads me to believe that you will possibly be able to ride either one of these, which, if you can choose which PvP mount you can get, as opposed to the Ashenvale event, where the Horde got one specific mount, it was a wolf, and the Alliance got one specific mount, it was a panther, which is basically the same model as this guy, but purple. Like, you didn't have an option to choose the other faction's mount, and the fact that there is a gnome on both of these leads me to believe that you will be able to choose either one of these that you might want. And originally I was going to bitch about the fact that the Alliance got the same mount again, but just a reskin. Well, I feel like they're dropping a little hint here by having a gnome on both, and I think that Alliance might be able to choose the raptor, where the Horde might be able to choose the tiger, I assume that's a tiger, or lion, and I think that is incredible. If that is the case, I am 100% choosing the lion, tiger, whatever this is. It's super cool. I really like that, and I really hope that I am correct in that assumption. I think the raptor actually looks cooler, like in terms of like a model. I think the raptor model looks cooler. I like the glowing kind of blue eye is very striking. I like that it's red, and I like the markings across it. I think that this is a better model, but you can't ride this on the Horde. At least in Classic WoW, you have zero opportunity to get one of these, except for, I think you can get one in a raid at level 60. So if this is the case, 100% I'm getting the tiger, lion, whatever it is, and I'll be excited for that.
Yes, you're seeing correctly. There will be 2 new faction-agnostic mounts that you will be able to acquire related to this event.
Faction-agnostic mounts. Does that completely invalidate the entire point I just made? That makes me sad. I hope... If they're faction-agnostic mounts, how come there's a gnome on both of them?
These level 40 mounts have an appearance that is completely new to the game. I hope to see you in the battlefield. And up next, Josh will join us and he will talk to you about profession updates.
Hello, my name is Josh Greenfield, Senior Game Producer on WoW Classic. Let's dive right in and talk about what we're going to be doing with professions in Phase.
I talked about professions a little bit earlier, but I really enjoyed the epic quest line for tailoring. I will be interested in whatever epic quest line comes next. I got the epic boots for my warlock. I thought that was a really cool quest line. You know, you craft the blue pair of boots, the rare quality boots, and then you go on a quest to gather materials and learn some stuff, and then all of a sudden you get to turn your blue quality boots into purple quality boots, and I thought that was really cool. So I hope that the profession updates continue to be as cool as the original Phase 1 professions were.
I want to start by saying that we've been really thrilled with the reception to our professions editions in Phase 1. It was really exciting watching people sort of discover and unlock how to create your awesome, void touch leather gloves. And
I didn't discover it. I used a guide online, but it was really exciting to actually do.
Your extra planar spider silk boots and all those things. And we're going to go ahead and expand on this quite a bit for Phase 2. There will be around 20 new recipes across all non-gathering professions. This also includes not just leatherworking, tailoring, and blacksmithing, but also alchemy, enchanting, and engineering as well. So
this is the huge part for me, because the 20 new recipes across all non-gathering professions is enormous for me, because I like that there's going to be new epic helmets. I like, enchanters are going to get something, where previously I don't think enchanters got anything. Alchemy got a new recipe, but it was something that you consumed specifically only for the quest to do your other crafting profession's epic quest. So, like, the new alchemy recipe in Phase 1 of Season of Discovery was a kind of a limp dick version of what everybody else got if you were like a tailor or a blacksmith or like a leather worker. Because you only ever needed one of those, and then you never gave a shit about the alchemy weapon or item even. You never cared about it ever again after you completed it the first time. You bought one off the auction house, at least I did. I paid like 2 gold for it, which is like the equivalent of doing like 1 quest, and then after that, I never cared about it again. So I feel like alchemy kind of got the shaft last time, but also there was no engineering item in Phase 1 of Season of Discovery, and it's exciting to see that they're going to be putting in Phase 2 engineering recipe, and the fact that it could be an explosive, leans into what engineers already do, and the bombs that they create are really cool. They stun people, they stun mobs in an AoE kind of fashion, but even though the stun is broken on damage, so it's technically an incapacitate effect, but they deal a good amount of damage. They actually massively increase the DPS of a lot of classes if you use them in the downtimes during your rotations. So the fact that there will be an upgraded bomb is really cool. I'll be excited for that.
We want to spread the love around here. We want to make sure everyone gets something really cool this time. So that's what we're going to do. Just like in Phase 1, there will be an epic quest chain to unlock this, and we won't spoil anything about that today. You're going to have to get in the game. You're going to have to kind of go through that yourself. But if you liked what we did
that was the best part. The epic quest chain was the best part of them adding new things. I don't just want to get the new recipe and then be like, okay, well, these are the materials that I need. Better head over to the auction house. And then I just buy them, in 5 minutes and like, boom, I've got the new epic item. Congratulations. Like you don't care about that. And by adding a quest chain, it forces you to not only discover where the next steps are over the course of several days and weeks, but it also forces you to do something to further progress your character, and I'm all about the progression systems. The progression in Phase 1 was so good, so I'm excited to see what the new quest chain is, and it already says new epic helms, so I'll be excited to craft a new, I hope, fingers crossed, that it's a witch's hat for tailoring, because I love the witch's hat aesthetic that they gave us in Black Fathom Deeps. There's an item that drops. It looks like a dope, wizard hat, and I hope that whatever the new helmet is, it looks like that, because that's my favorite look in the entire game. I think that looks super cool. Way better than just a hood, right? There's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong with just a hood, but it doesn't feel as thematic as something more like the Sorting Hat from Harry Potter, you know what I mean? Doesn't feel as thematic as that.
In Phase 1, you'll probably like this too. Next, I kind of want to talk a little bit about just some of the recipes here. I'm not going to go into super great detail about what...
Wow, I'm surprised that they decided to show it. The Neuro... Okay, so for Cloth, I'm specifically going to look at Cloth because this is the one I care about because I played a Warlock. The Neuro-linked Arcanofilament Monocle. So it answers my question, right? We now know what it is. It's a monocle. But it's interesting that it requires tailoring where you would imagine, for engineers, they have goggles. They have engineering goggles. They're one of the only classes that gets to craft I think they're the only profession that gets to craft a helmet very early on in the game. So the fact that this is a monocle, I'm a little bit disappointed by. Hopefully it's a super cool looking monocle and it's not just like a circle on your eyeball. Not that that's not great and all, but I want a cool looking model. But I'm really surprised that they decided to show the actual stats on it. So 10 stam, 11 intellect, that's really good. Increases damage and healing done by spells and effect by 22. That's pretty goddamn high. Restores 4 mana per 5. That's cool. That's that's gonna help smooth out the rotation. I'll be honest, the one thing that I really hate as a Warlock is having to press the life tap button. And that is maybe the only thing that pisses me off about being a Warlock is that I spend more time life tapping than I feel like I should have to. A lot more time. I have to life tap a significant amount of times because the spells cost so much mana. So that's a little bit of a pain in the ass. But at the same time, having things that restore mana per 5 is going to help kind of smooth. I talked about this earlier with Shaman and with Hunters and stuff like that. It's going to help smooth out that gameplay. But it's got an on-use effect. It looks like all of them have an on-use effect. And it says, harness the latent arcane energy in the nearby air to give you charged inspiration, reducing the mana cost of all spells by 50%, and increasing damage and healing done by up to 50 for 12 seconds. And it's got a 10-minute cooldown, so that's this is the big wiener DPS cooldown. So you're going to use this, and then you're not going to use it again until the next fight. But everything that you do will have 50% less mana and be increased by 50 damage, which is a lot. It's definitely a lot. This is going to be a huge cooldown, and not only that, but it also works for healing, so it's not only just a damage dealer cooldown, but it's also a healing throughput cooldown for when let's say tank damage gets really high or raid-wide damage gets really high, which will be likely an effect of like the radiation of the things, the bosses inside of Gnomeregan. This is going to be huge, but it's a once per fight cooldown. I'm glad that they showed this, and then kind of looking at the requirements that you will need to craft it. Some of these can be gotten in the current game as it stands, like bolt of Mageweave Cloth. You can pick up Mageweave Cloth from any humanoid, and then if you're a tailor, you can turn it into bolts. Vision Dust you can get from just disenchanting items and stuff like that. But like this insulating Nyadine, this item is brand new, first of all, and also looks like it's going to be coming from the raid itself, the Gnomeregan raid. So it looks like you will be required to run the raid prior to being able to craft these, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, they want you in there doing all of the content. So, you know, I don't mind that you have to run the raid to actually get this item. But that is something to keep in mind, that you won't be crafting these and like before you go in and then you're raid ready, you know, with this purple item. You will probably be already in possession of a purple item or two before you actually get to craft this, regardless of whether you're a blacksmith, a tailor, or a leather worker. It's also interesting that this requires faintly glowing leather, which I imagine will be something that only leather workers can make, and I find that super annoying as someone who is not a leather worker, because now I have to go and figure out how I'm going to get my hands on this from a different person, and I don't know if you guys played and checked the prices of leather in Phase 1, but leather was ridiculously expensive, especially medium leather. Like, getting it, even a small amount of it, was absurdly expensive to the point that I just dropped one of my professions, became a skinner, and leveled skinning up in like an hour, and then went and got my own medium leather, and then put it in my bank so that I never had to go to the auction house for it again. Because, like, I'm simply not going to pay that much gold for the amount of leather that I needed to craft like 2 items. Like, it was ridiculous. It was literally like 3 hours worth of quests to get the leather that I would need to craft like 2 things. And like, I'm just not going to do that. It took less time to pick up skinning and level it all the way to max and get my own leather than it would have to actually get the gold. So that's cool. I'm glad that these are coming. I'm going to listen to what they say.
These are, and all the stats and everything like that. As you can see, they're very powerful. But one thing I do want to kind of call out is that you'll notice that a few of the materials required are brand new materials to the game.
Yeah, I just said that.
Used across different professions.
Yeah.
Some really similar new materials. There's definitely going to be a trading and kind of economy aspect to these new professions recipes. And just like everything with Season of Discovery, we're most excited to see how players share resources and information to make these things.
As much as I like that, I also kind of don't like that. I already complained about it, so I'm not going to keep going. But like that was literally the thing that annoyed me most about trying to craft my purple, my epic boots as a tailor in Phase 1, is the having to interact with other players to get the things, because other players are douchebags and want to put leather up for like a ridiculously huge price, an absurdly gigantic price in stacks that you don't need, like stacks of 20 when you only need 4. Like, it was ridiculous. I didn't like that part. Hopefully it'll be better in Phase 2. Maybe since I'll be playing it closer to the launch, it won't be as big of an issue. But man, dude, that really agitated me in Phase 1. So, you know, I'm glad they like it. I'm glad that they like that as like a core mechanic of why they're doing the professions the way they're doing them. That being said, I disagree.
That's all we're going to say right now, but we think it's going to be a pretty fun thing to participate in.
I disagree.
Few other things we kind of want to talk about is alchemy and enchanting in particular. You know, when we were looking at what we wanted to do here, we could obviously add more consumables, and we can add...
Okay. This is important because I talked about alchemy earlier. Alchemy got the shaft because the new thing that they got to craft in Phase 1, you used one time and then never cared about again. Like I said, I paid 2 gold for it, which took me like literally like an hour of questing to get, and then I went and I bought it and I never cared about it ever again. So it is cool that they are adding an alchemy recipe that is something that you will need to buy like over and over again for raids, and for like if you want to be cutting edge on the damage meter or the Yeah, it looks like it's only damage. If you want to be cutting edge on the damage meter, you're going to need to buy these a lot. And that is good for alchemists. Bad for everybody else. It's bad for us, right? But at the same time, you can't just knock one profession completely off the board and expect people not to be upset. This is going to restore health. No, it's going to restore health and mana. So it's a healing potion and a mana potion, which is good. And then in addition to that, it also gives you a large amount of damage that you use like a cooldown. So like all of this, the entire alchemy recipe looks like it's going to be pretty baller. You're going to definitely need these, and I think that is good for alchemy overall. For enchanting, I don't think enchanters got anything in Phase 1 of Season of Discovery, so it's cool to see that they have something. It's like a buff, like a long-term buff that you put on. You'll probably need to grab these so that you can raid. This will be like a new thing that you have to invest time into grinding so that you can get into raids and be cutting edge in the raid. While that could be good, it will also be just another thing that you need to get every single week before you go into Gnomeregan. So, is that great? You know, time will tell. We'll have to wait and see. But at the same time, I think that it is good that they are getting something. The fact that they didn't get anything, at least I'm pretty sure they didn't get anything in Phase 1, kind of sucks for enchanters. This is going to be something that everyone needs to buy, because it increases not only damage but also healing. So regardless of whether you're a spellcaster or or like a melee DPS class, or if you play a healer, everyone is going to need these enchanted sigils, and I think that's a good thing overall for the game.
More enchants for enchanters, and to a degree there are new enchanting material recipes other than what you see here. But
well, that's good too.
One of the things about these professions is that in a lot of cases they don't do a whole lot for your personal throughput. If you're one of these professions, a lot of times you can make things, and a lot of times you can make a lot of gold off of having these professions. But in terms of your actual like damage output or healing output, they don't really bring anything that you can't have someone else craft for you and bring. So that's what we wanted to try here. In particular, if you'll notice on the left side, there's this new enchanted sigil innovation. And what this basically is that this is kind of like a world buff that you can carry around in your bag and give to yourself. And essentially, it has a 30-minute duration, but also a 30-minute cooldown. So if you die early, you will lose this for at least some period of time before you can put it back on.
That's interesting. I did not notice the 30-minute cooldown originally. I think that's a good thing because it forces you to use it in opportunities where you know you won't die, or it forces you to play well. So, when you use this in a raid, you gotta expect that you will actually clear the raid boss, and I think that's important, because you don't just want to give people something that they can just use forever, right? Like, with zero penalty if something goes wrong. You do want to punish them to a certain extent, but not to the point where it's like incredibly, like it feels so bad that they just don't even want to play the game anymore. So I think this is a good thing. Overall, I think that the fact that they are adding kind of throughput related mechanics to these is good. But that being said, how much is this going to cost the rest of us is my concern here. Because if you're adding throughput mechanics to both the enchanters and the alchemists, that just increases how valuable these things are in terms of how much they're needed for the raid. And because of that, it could get to the point where you maybe feel like you can't do the raid without this stuff. And like maybe the general perception will turn out to be that like no one invites you to a group if you don't have your enchanted sigil and your mildly irradiated potion, plus your food buff, plus whatever else other thing you might need for the raid. And that could lead to, like, a significant amount of additional grinding that you don't want to do. So I feel like they got to be careful. This is like a fine line to walk, right? Like you want your professions to be powerful, but you don't want them to be so powerful that they become absolutely necessary no matter what, and players can't get groups for the raid because they don't have access to the amount of gold necessary to pick up the items from different professions that they don't actually have themselves.
Same thing with Alchemist here. They have the ability to make this essentially damage and healing consumable, or damage and attack power consumable, and that also restores a little bit of health and a little bit of mana. So that's just something that's a little unique for them this time. And we hope that you like these things. We're looking for feedback on this sort of stuff for future phases.
Well, I just gave you some feedback. I hope you guys listen to that, because it is important to walk that fine line. But for the love of God, man, like, I don't want to spend 5 hours per week grinding for materials just so that I can get into a raid that lasts for 1 hour. You know what like that is not a cool gameplay mechanic. So please don't make them so important that you can't do the raid without them. Make it needs to be kind of like an icing on the cake type deal, because if those become so important that you just literally can't do the raid without it, then we're all going to be spending way too much time doing quests that we should be saving for leveling in Phase 3, specifically so that we can get the gold enough to actually pay for our materials to get into the Gnomeregan raid to begin with. And I'm glad they're adding more.
So now that we've kind of gone through an overview, Phase 2 and some of the things that are coming in it, we do want to kind of, I guess, hit a few of the frequently asked questions that we've gotten recently about things in Phase 1 and some of the issues that have popped up and how we're addressing those. As well as just some
I'm going to fast forward just a little bit.
Was too much feeling of FOMO. So by way of a compromise, what we're looking at doing this time is we will not delay the opening of the raid, but we will be putting the first 2 lockouts on kind of a normal weekly lockout timer. So that means that would reset on like Tuesday in North America, Wednesday in Europe, and so on and so forth.
So this is one thing that is kind of unique to WoW that I have not seen inside of games like Destiny. And I think this is important to talk about because Destiny's weekly raid lockout is an antiquated system that has come, it literally stems from the original MMOs like World of Warcraft as it stood in like 2004 and leading onward. Going into a raid and then you get whatever drops you get and then you have to wait until the next week before you can go in, I think is not a good system anymore. There was a time where everybody, that was just the way of things, and that's just how it goes. You got to do your raid, and then 7 days before you can do another raid, and that's just how it was, and we just all accepted that, right? But at some point along the way, WoW decided it was a good idea to give you a 3-day lockout instead of a 7-day lockout, and I can't express enough how much better a 3-day lockout feels compared to a 7-day. Because it gives you enough time that you can get the things you need for the next time you gotta go raid, but at the same time, it doesn't make it so that you never, you feel like you never get to raid. Because there have definitely been times in WoW, and specifically in, some of the older expansions, where I would be at work, or, my buddy would be at work, and it's time to raid, bro. Our guild is going in, we're going to raid, and if you're not here, sorry. And sometimes I was the guy who wasn't there, and they same thing to me. Sorry, dude. What do you want us to do? You want us to wait just for you? There's 9 other people who are here, or 24 other people at the time who are here and ready to raid. We're not just gonna wait for you. And that felt bad. And because of that, a lot of times somebody or myself would not get to be part of the raid that week, and that was just it. And that was just how it goes. So a 3-day lockout means that there's more opportunities per week for you to get into the raid, but also if you're doing all of that, there's more opportunities for yourself to get the gear from the raid. And when you add on the tokens that we talked about earlier, where if you don't get the raid loot that you want, you can then turn in the token to get the raid loot that you actually want. I think that really that's gonna smooth out the whole process of raiding a lot. The 3-day lockout also encourages more groups. Which combats the problem that I was talking about where someone's at work and everybody's going in and that's just going to be that. 3-day lockout means, well, hey man, I know you're working tonight, but in 3 more days when it resets again this week, you and I can go in, we'll find a group together, and that kind of eliminates that issue. I like that a lot. And I think the antiquated 7-day raid lockout system needs to go in every game. It needs to be taken out, because it's not fun. It's not fun to be a part of, and it's not fun if your group goes in and you don't get to raid with them. I don't think there's any reason to keep it. I think that every game should be moving to the 3-day cadence. With the raid release schedule not being gated out a week in advance, it allows for the hardcore players and streamers to get into the content as quickly as possible. and they're going to get in there, they're going to get to run the raid and get their loot, because they're probably going to be level 40 in like the first day. And they might be level 40 in the first afternoon, and then that evening they're already jumping into the raid. You don't want these players to have to wait a week before they can actually have fun. So I do agree that don't gate it out a week in advance, even though some people aren't going to be on the cutting edge. The thing is, it's not meant to be competitive in that way. There's still the race to do it first, but at the same time, the race to do it first is not so important that, like, Johnny Two Jobs feels like he can't get in there because, like, he has to work his second job and there's no way he's going to make it to 40 by the end of the first day. Like, so I think this is, like, the best possible scenario. They have a weekly lockout for the first 2 weeks, which means people won't get so far ahead that they can never be caught up to. And I think this is the best possible scenario for that. I don't think we need to read or listen to everything that they have to say here, because this about says it all. First 2 lockouts will be a weekly lockout. Cool. On the week of February 20th, the normal 3-day cadence will begin. Cool. And it will give those wanting to push the opportunity to do so, and those wanting to level slower, less FOMO to worry about. I think there's really nothing better that you could do than what is going on right here. I like that, so we're going to go ahead and push forward to the next slide. PvP matchmaking adjustments. I think we're just going to fast track our way through the rest of this because we kind of saw what we needed to see here. Small groups and solo will prefer the same size groups. I think that's good because I talked earlier about how in PvP, occasionally I would run into a massive group of the opposite faction, and then I would just end up, my team would just end up losing because there were just way more of them than there were of us. And that also happened in Battlegrounds, which is the IQ for a PvP game. In Battlegrounds, I would also run into the issue where my group is like a bunch of solo players, and the enemy team is like a group of 10 people in a Discord call together. And that would essentially just mean that we would get stomped. And there's nothing we could do about it, because we are 10 solo players, typing in chat to each other, trying to communicate, where the Discord call is like they're all grouped up, they're making calls, they've got one guy who's doing the running, they had a strat and they were just able to absolutely demolish us. I'm glad that small groups and solos will prefer the same size groups, because it will kind of get rid of the problem of running into 10-player groups that just absolutely demolish you. But it's good that if the queues get too long, that it will take you out of that system just to get you into a game, because there's nothing worse than waiting for like 45 minutes for your queue to pop, and then like you don't even want to play PvP anymore, Like you just lost all of your incentive to play the game, and I don't like when that thing happens. That used to happen in Wrath of the Lich King. If you queued as DPS in the random dungeon finder, you would sometimes wait for like an hour before you could finally get into a dungeon, and like by the time your queue popped, sometimes you weren't even at the computer anymore. Sometimes you got up to make a sandwich because it literally just took so long that you couldn't wait any longer. So I'm glad that they're going to take you out of the queue if it goes on too long. That way you can get into a game. Let's go to the leveling updates. We got the new 50% Discoverer's Delight buff from 1 to 25. So a 50% experience buff from 1 to 25. That's going to be good for the players who are just starting Season of Discovery. And if you're just coming into it in phase 2, you want to catch up to your buddies who are also playing, and they're probably starting at 25. So you're going to level 50% faster from 1 to 25. I think that's really good. The Black Fathom Deeps raid will give a sizable amount of XP upon completion. I think that is also really good, because that means you can go in there at it's not that hard of a raid, so realistically you could go in there at like level 23 or something like that, and maybe you get an entire level's worth of XP from completing the raid. I think that'll be good. The Waylaid supplies are the thing that you turn in to gain reputation with the new faction that is introduced here in Season of Discovery. When you turn these in, you have the option to either fill the crate with the item in question, which will give a large amount of reputation, or you can just turn in the empty crate, which will give a small amount of reputation. But the fact that they're giving greatly increased XP gives you a better incentive to hold on to these things and make sure that you're actually like turning them in when you have the opportunity. I've had a few times where there were more of these that dropped than I could actually pick up. So the one thing that I would really be excited for them to do is remove the you can only hold one at a time constraint off of them. I don't think that you should be constrained away from that and like deterred from picking these up. But that at the same time, I understand that they don't want everybody just stockpiling these and blasting their way through the reputation gain. So I understand the reason for it, but at the same time, take that shit away so that we can turn in like 2 or 3 of these. Because when we're out questing and our bags get full, sometimes like 2 or 3 of these drop, and you want to be able to turn all of them in because they give that large amount of reputation bonus if you're able to fill it. Sometimes you can only fill 1, and that causes you to have to delete the ones that you picked up earlier, or just leave them on the corpse. And now you're walking away from the potential reputation gain that you could have gotten. The one change that I want them to change with the waylaid supplies is to please remove the constraint of only being able to hold 1. Is that all for the leveling updates? That is all for the leveling updates. For Ashen Vale, moving Ashen Vale to a 3-hour timer in Phase 2. I'm glad that they're moving it to a 3-hour timer as opposed to having it activate based on player activity, because like I said, on realms where you run into the issue of population disparity, there is this problem where the other team, or your team, depending on which one you are, completes it really fast, and then you sit there and do nothing if you're the losing team, or you stomp out the losing team so quickly that it feels like nothing was even happening in the first place. So moving it to a 3-hour timer will mean that there's less opportunity for everyone to snowball their way to victory because your population on your faction is just way higher than the other team's population. I also like that they are continuing to iterate on this because I do think Ashen Vale is a cool PvP experience, and I do like the ability to grab that mount. Like I said, being able to have a mount was really cool at level 25, which was never available prior to that in any iteration of Classic WoW. World buffs. The Ashen Vale weekly quest world buff cannot be gained after level 39. I think that's good because the Ashen Vale world buff is pretty strong. You don't want players to be going back to Ashen Vale as a level 40 character, stomping out lower level characters just for the sake of picking up this world buff so they can run Gnomeregan with it. The Black Fathom Deeps world buff cannot be gained after 39. This is also good because the main draw of the Black Fathom Deeps world buff was that you got to move faster. And you don't need that as much in the level 40 bracket because people will have their actual, their ground mount, their first iteration of the ground mount. So they already have a 60% movement speed buff. They don't need the 20% from the Black Fathom Deeps world buff. Although it did give a throughput advantage, right? Like your spells hit harder, or your melee attacks hit harder, or your heals were better. So there was a reason to have this and take it into the raid, but you don't really need it after level 39 because you have the mount, and that gives you the main draw of the world buff to begin with, which is not having to walk as slowly between place to place. The Stranglethorn Vale PvP event will not have a world buff, but Gnomeregan will. I think this is also good because you don't want to force players into PvP, especially free-for-all PvP, because free-for-all PvP can just get crazy, and if you've never played in a free-for-all style game or in a free-for-all style type of matchmaking, it gets nuts, dude. And your players are killing you, the enemy team is killing you, and sometimes you're the guy who's killing everyone, but a lot of the times you're the guy who's getting killed. And for people who don't want to play PvP, adding a world buff specifically to PvP kind of forces their hand, and that is not a fun experience for people who don't give a shit. So this is the best case scenario. The Gnomeregan world buff will be, ideally will be as good as the Black Fathom Deeps world buff. And hopefully, we'll still give you that additional movement speed buff, because not everyone will be level 39. I liked that Black Fathom Deeps buff gave you 20% movement speed, so hopefully, when people run Gnomeregan and they turn in whatever it is for them to gain the world buff for everyone in their faction, hopefully it will still give a speed buff. And I also hope that it remains in the cities that it's currently in. Like, for the Horde, that means you have to be in Thunderbluff. I want it to stay in Thunderbluff, because Thunderbluff is the most accessible main city for Horde for everything. Like, everything is very clustered together inside of Thunderbluff. I don't want to go to the Undercity and have that be the place where I now have to hang out for the entirety of Phase 2 of Season of Discovery. It's sad and boring there. No offense to Undercity. Like, you know, the aesthetic is cool. I like it for a time, but I don't want to spend every moment of my day waiting around for someone to pop a world buff inside of Undercity. That is not going to be as fun as chilling out in Thunderbluff. I hope it stays in the cities that it's currently in. It says, goal, keep each phase's world buffs fun and exciting without making the evolving endgame too much of a slog as new buffs are added. That is good. I don't want to go back and get the Black Fathom Deeps world buff just to be able to go into Gnomeregan. Cool, I like that. Profession specializations. Professions will be capped at 225 in Phase 2. Specializations will not be available until Phase 3. So if you guys don't know about specializations, that's like when your professions get high enough, certain professions can choose 2 paths, and the 2 paths will give you certain recipes that you could only get if you chose each path. So like for engineers, you can go either gnome engineering or goblin engineering, and the 2 things will give you different things depending on which one you picked. I like that professions are going to be capped. Again, this is just the next iteration of professions. They're currently capped at 150, so being capped at 225 means that we won't have too much of a grind, but it will still feel like progression of your character as you level your professions up. And then not having the professions until Phase 3 means that you won't have to spend so much time leveling your professions that you won't be able to get into the Gnomeregan raid unless you have the specializations. I don't think that that's so important until we make it to the end. It says we're planning something special for these at level 50 and 60. I hope that the next bracket after 40 is not like, okay, now it's level 50 and like it doesn't go straight to 60. I want to see it go straight to 60 in Phase 3. I hope that's the case and we don't have like okay, well, we're stopping at 50 and then we're going to go on to 60 in Phase 4. Not that I don't want a Phase 4, because I do. I just don't think that it's necessary to only make the next phase 10 levels. So we'll see. I haven't heard anything else about this, about level 50, so ideally it will only be profession specialization related. We'll have to see in the future. Gonna move on here. Botting and exploitative accounts. Yeah, so like the more popular a version of a game is, the more bots are gonna be in it. And basically, they're just farming materials to sell for real-life currency. And nobody likes that. It destroys the economy. It causes people to spend their real-life money on gold, and also gives players an unnecessary advantage for no reason other than they have like a Visa or a MasterCard with enough money on it to buy their way to whatever advantage they want. I don't like bots. I don't think anybody does. I don't think anybody is out there aside from the people who actually run the bots being like, man, I sure do love me some bots. So, you know, I'm glad that they're going to get those out of here. Gold bids and GDKP. They're not permitting GDKP, which is basically like, if you have enough gold, you bid gold on items in raids instead of just the current system, which is like, you know, one guy hands it out, or you roll need or greed and the highest roll gets the item. I don't think gold should be the determining factor of whether or not you can get your raid loot. And I also think that GDKP, which is essentially, like I said, just being able to pay more gold than the other guy so you get your raid loot first. I think that is literally the detriment to, not the detriment, it's literally the thing, the determining factor as to why there are so many botters and people gathering things to sell gold in real life. So the less opportunity for people to sell gold in real life, the better, in my opinion. I'm glad they're getting rid of GDKP, and it looks like they're going to possibly ban people for doing it, which is maybe like a pretty hard stance to take. But if it's going to help with the gold buyers and with the botters, you know, they got to do what they got to do. Either way, I'm glad they're trying something, because certain players will not get the raid loot that they want, because I talked about him earlier, but Johnny Two Jobs, who works 2 jobs, has more money in his bank account than us, and he decided to spend it on a website that sells gold in a video game. So, like, I don't think that those guys should get more raid loot than, like, other people who are just playing the game. So I think this is good. Maybe a hard stance to ban accounts, but we will see. And then it says, thank you. This has been an incredible video, and I'm going to go ahead and link it here in the chat. Just going to drop it there a couple of times. And I appreciate them coming out and giving the, like, very detailed preview, and I can't wait to dive into it. I was really excited about Phase 1. I hope that you guys will want to see some of that content, because I'm definitely going to be playing that game, and I can't wait to jump in and find the new runes and do the new raid. The way that they executed Phase 1 of Season of Discovery is something to behold,